Hello and welcome to episode 76 of Prose. This week we have two stories that share the theme of love. Sort of. So prepare yourself to seduce a couple and steel yourself against surviving a living hell of dates. The second of the stories this week features our first guest author in some time. Claire Parker is the newest addition to the Prose family, and I have no doubt that you will enjoy her piece. Also, Prose is getting prepped to start putting forward merchandise that fans might want to get their hands on. Right now, we just have cool vinyl stickers, but lapel pins and t-shirts are in the realm of the possible too. Please listen to the updates at the top and the bottom of each episode to get those future updates. As per the usual, I beg you all to please follow the show on all social media. Generally, we are at Prose Podcast. Even more amazing would be if you would head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating or review for Prose. Ratings and reviews really do help me out, and I love to hear your feedback. For easiest access to the show, subscribe using Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, or whatever podcast catcher makes you happy. Thanks for listening. Let's get to the tale, shall we? This week, we have Falling into Bed and You're Going to Get It Wrong by Claire Parker. Oh, and just as one final note, the episodes this week are a bit more mature in the realm of sexuality and violence than they have been in a good long while. As with all podcasts and other media, do be sure to pay attention to ratings on these episodes. That E for explicit really does mean something. Alright, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Falling into Bed, an original short story by Jared I. McGee.
Cheers, bitches.
Melody slurred as she stumbled forward, almost careening headlong into the entertainment center that Chuck had been raving about having just purchased last week throughout the night tonight. Melody's lurch almost brought her into an odd embrace with a soccer mom type that had happened to be at the party. The woman had disappeared into watching the TV, using the live-action Cinderella that had come up on Chuck's to-watch playlist as an excuse to hide away from the rest of the partiers present. Melody had ditched as soon as the newest Star Wars flick had gone off. Not that she was actually sitting and watching the film. Sci-fi was alright and everything, but Melody was far more interested in Daisy Ridley. Damned if that Jedi warrior in training wasn't a hot piece of ass. Star Wars was one of the first inklings Melody had ever had that she was bi. It wasn't Daisy. It was Carrie. Those buns and that metal bikini did it for her brother. Those buns and that metal bikini did it for her too.
Cheers, bitches.
She yelled sloshed again as she took another healthy swig from her... What was it now? She'd moved on past Jack and Ginger's an hour ago. Right, a healthy swig of her Caribou Lou. 151 always made her rowdy, horny, and oddly aggressive. Though generally aggressive in all the right ways for a party. The problem was that Chuck's parties were always... tame. The soccer mom glued to a shit remake of a classic animated film was indicative of everyone that ever attended those social abortions. Hollow chat about the weather and slow, moderate intake of alcohol were hallmarks of a Chuck DeGrassini party. He was a good guy, Chuck, but everyone knew that he was a touch boy. White bread come to life. Nice enough, but lacking any real substance. Tonight was the night, though. Chuck might be boring, but Chuck was also gorgeous. 6'3", a former All-American swimmer, proficient in all 4 competitive strokes naturally. Tanned, thick flowing sandy blonde hair, and the deepest coal-black eyes Melody had ever seen. Boring Chuck was going to get a bit of a surprise tonight, hell or high water if she had her way. That also meant that Sasha needed to either also have a really good night or a really bad night herself. Chuck's girlfriend of 3 years was nice enough, but she was the mayonnaise to his white bread. For two gorgeous people, they were both intolerably dull. They wouldn't even indulge in bottomless mimosas at brunch.
Alcohol in the day is for heathens and the unemployed.
Sasha would sing-song when invited to partake. Their lameness aside, though, again, they were smoking. Sasha had been a swimmer too, and she had one of those impossible bodies that only models and those that have a great deal of silicone injected here, there, and everywhere can generally have. Sasha was all natural, though. Cinnamon skin, cappuccino hair, chocolate eyes. All 5'4" of her was delectable and a treat, to be sure. Her stomach was as flat as Chuck's and actually might have more abdominal ripples. Her accent? Dear God, that little Colombian flair that marked her as a native Spanish speaker made Melody distracted even when she wasn't lit and DTF. In all honesty, it wasn't really their fault that they were exhaustingly devoid of hipness. It's tough to be fascinating. Really tough the minute you enter the real adult world. Most wobble into it somewhere around 25. After that, one generally has to work at it. Melody had worked at becoming who she was for years. High school hadn't been kind to her. She blossomed in college and even more so after. Chuck and Sasha had both been gorgeous their entire lives. They'd never really had a hard time making a friend or fitting in, so they hadn't had to be resilient enough to form anything resembling unique interests or depth of personality. Melody didn't mind that, particularly when they threw parties and the booze was free, the music was throbbing, and there were people she could dance, chat, and chill with. Maybe make out with at the good ones. Those were few and far between. Thank you very much, alcohol. Helping Chuck fall into bed was as easy as helping Sasha fall into bed. So, Melody, bound to have a night worth having, a night worthy of her younger self and actually living rather than just heaping on piles of breath until the end, popped her hips just a little too much and stumbled toward Sasha. Sure, Melody was 6 sips away from being blind drunk on the verge of passing out, but Melody also knew her worth and knew her appeal. The carnal possibilities helped sharpen her senses just a touch as she approached Sasha, who, at that time, was rearranging some books on a bookshelf in their living room amid the, what she'd call, revelry. Because of course, Sasha would be doing that. The Rolling Stones' Honky Tonk Woman came on as Melody engaged. I met a gin-soaked barroom queen in Memphis. She tried to take me upstairs for a ride.
Well, Sash, this is another success. Gorgeous lighting, heaps of yummy hors d'oeuvres, decent music. Thank you, Melody.
Sasha tossed out in her odd, quick, but song-like way of speaking. She always rushed her speech, particularly when she was nervous, like having to connect with others through verbalization was difficult or scary. For a woman that put the earthly realm to shame with her looks, she certainly was anxious.
It looks like things are winding down in some ways, and picking up in others.
Melody gestured to two of their friends who'd been eyeing one another for at least 6 months. Jeff and Simon both worked in accounting and both clearly wanted the other, but it looked like tonight had something a little peculiar in the punch. The two relatively quiet men finally making their moves. Melody stated as much as the two watched the soon-to-be lovers get heavier and more rushed with their tongues and their hands.
They won't be staying too terribly much longer, eh? Well, that or you two will have quite the show at your party now and quite the cleanup to do later.
Sasha simply blushed, but She kept watching the two men for a lingering moment later, only going back to her mistimed straightening after taking in a gulp of the two's romance. This was a woman in need of excitement. The lady then she covered me with roses. She blew my nose and then she blew my mind. Melody couldn't be coy. She didn't have the time to. The 151 and other 20-odd alcohols flowing through her bloodstream meant that she'd be down soon, unless she got her heart rate up and her business going. Coyness abandoned. Attempts at witticism and talking Sasha into bed abandoned. Melody just reached out, grabbed Sasha's right arm gently, but with purpose, spun her back around from her tidying, and pecked her lips softly, followed by another, slower, far more intention-laden kiss on the nape of her neck, just below her right ear. From Sasha's intake of breath and subsequent loosening of muscles alone, Melody knew things were going to go just fine tonight. Fortune favors the bold and all that rot. After only 2 or 3 minutes of suggestive whispers, stolen pecks, and gentle bites, Sasha took Melody by the hand with uncharacteristic boldness and led her into the back dining area where Chuck was taking stock of what snacks were still left for the party. Their approach alone spoke volumes, and Chuck was visibly shaken, clearly both intimidated and intrigued by this odd situation slinking in before him. It only took one kiss from Sasha, one light bite on the neck from Melody, and both women to press their bodies against each of his sides for but a moment, along with maybe a couple suggestive words, to get Chuck on board. Melody was finding that white bread and mayonnaise are quite easy to dress into anything you wish them to be. Cheers, bitches. Melody said in her most sultry velveteen voice as she closed the couple's bedroom door and flicked the now all too bright overhead light off. Her buzz wasn't wearing off, but that switch in her head that denoted a night wasn't going to be remembered was flipped to off now. She'd be able to perform for the foreseeable few hours and definitely remember her hedonistic happiness. Sasha looked eager and something akin to starving, licking her lips and ready to dive in. She was already slinking out of her silky aquamarine dress. Chuck was clearly a bit more nervous. Her trepidation now aimed at Sasha's dim figure, only highlighted by the glow and the various electronic devices around the room. His trepidation all but disappeared as Sasha's dress hit the floor. If she was that excited about the three of them, that meant that he could be as well. Melody smiled and thought to herself, 3 can keep a secret if you get rid of 2. Out loud, she smirked out, and you get rid of 3 by making them all 1. What? Chuck asked nervously. Oh, nothing. Come here, Sasha. Melody purred as she pulled Chuck to the bed with her. Sasha gliding over, the blue lights of chargers in the plugged-in world making her cinnamon skin look alight with magic. Thank you for listening to Falling Into Bed. All sounds you hear come from freesound.org and freemusicarchive.org, and they are all being used under CC 0 1.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. Next up this week, I hope you'll stick around for a new guest author's first appearance here on the podcast. Next up, we have another interesting tale of love? With Claire Parker's You're Going to Get It Wrong. You're Going to Get It Wrong, an original short story by Claire Parker. Jamie stirred her coffee. She hadn't been putting anything new in it, but it was still too hot to drink and she was nervous. This was her first date from a dating site, and she couldn't get it out of her head that the guy she was meeting might be married, or an axe murderer, or bald. That would be terrible. Good hair was important. She was debating about whether it would be okay if he had a bald spot, and hadn't come to any satisfactory conclusion when he arrived. Max Jennings, thankfully, had a full head of hair and seemed to be put together well enough everywhere else to not be repulsive. He power-walked directly over to her table and sat down. Jamie, hi. I'm Max. She put out a hand to shake his, and as she did, he muttered, handshake. That was weird, Jamie thought as she tried to keep her eyebrows from betraying her confusion. There was nothing in his online profile that would indicate any sort of processing disorder or mental disturbance. She pushed the thought away.
So, she started awkwardly, tell me about yourself.
Max let out a huge audible sigh and threw his head back. Can't we just skip it? Just this once. This was not going well. Jamie thought about leaving, but was hesitant to make a scene. He was clearly unusual, so she didn't want to run at the risk of him following her home if he was also violent. She put on her small talk smile and forged ahead.
Do you go on a lot of these internet dates then?
Yes. No. Sort of.
How do you sort of go on dates?
Well, I've gone on this date. Repeatedly. 4,700 and... He paused to check something on his phone. 45 times, as of now. If you think about it that way, you and I have been dating for 13 years. Happy anniversary. He raised an imaginary glass in toast. This was the nightmare scenario. Delusional and fixated on her. She had to get out. Jamie could feel the center of her palms getting sweaty, but she had been raised not to make a scene, especially in public. So, she smiled again, awkwardly, more on one side of her mouth than the other, and tried to battle through. While she was trying to think of what to say, how do you even respond to that? Max passed her a napkin. For your hands. They sweat when you're nervous. Anytime I try to tell you the truth, you get nervous. He smiled, not unkindly. Janie took the napkin and rubbed it between her hands, trying to concentrate on the way the paper felt instead of literally anything else that was happening. He leaned forward and continued. Look, I'm sorry for being impatient. It's just that I'm exhausted from doing this, you know?
No, I don't know.
She spoke through a thin laugh and looked up at him. He seemed less crazy somehow. Her answer apparently frustrated Max, as he sighed again and ran his hands through his hair. It was good hair. Good hair for a potential psychopath. She looked at her hands again. Of course you don't. Fuck. He put his hands out before she could respond. Sorry, I know you don't like cursing. You're old-fashioned like that. I didn't like cursing either until I got cursed, I guess. So, it's a curse? She felt like she needed to say something, and that was all she could process. Yeah, it's very fairy tale. I have to relive this day until I get true love's first kiss. And I have literally been kissed by everyone in a 12-block radius except you. You always run off and you are wicked fast. So here you are, my last hope. If you kiss me, maybe it'll be Sunday when I wake up tomorrow." He looked up at her expectantly. Jamie pulled away and her chair made an audible squeaking sound against the floor. He reached out and grabbed her hand on the table. She noticed that his were also sweating. "Please don't. I'm desperate. Just one kiss and I can be out of your life forever if you want. Please. I've gotten so bored over the last few years that I've tried new ways of killing myself every day as a form of entertainment. I can't go on like this. Please." Despite herself, Jamie found herself feeling sorry for this man. He seemed so earnest, so genuine. He needed her, and that was surprisingly intoxicating. Besides, she liked helping people. Without a second thought, Jamie leaned over the table and kissed Max. Jamie had heard your first kiss described as magical, but she didn't think that this was what people meant. The moment her lips touched his, she could see all sorts of strange things, all to do with Max. Max chasing after her out of the same coffee shop they were in and losing her. Max standing her up. Max kissing waitresses and bus drivers. Max riding his bike in front of an oncoming car. Max jumping out of the building. Max dunking his head in a deep fat fryer at the Burger King down the street. Max seeing how much of his skin he could peel off with a knife before he passed out. That last one happened right here, right at this table. Jamie pulled away, gasping for air. He smiled and reached for her, and Jamie took off. She looked back to see if he was following her across the street when the car hit her. Even I couldn't have foreseen you fucking up that badly. Max didn't need to look to know who it was in Jamie's recently vacated chair. You mean this wasn't your plan? Bold of you to assume I had a plan. Max still couldn't look at him. He just kept staring at Jamie's body in the middle of the road. There were sounds of people screaming and cars screeching to stop. They all sounded far away. His companion continued, undeterred. You got what you wanted, though. The curse is over. You can live your life now. Granted, now you have to live it without the soulmate you wanted. Ah well, c'est la vie, eh? His laugh was cold and deep, as the day they had made their deal. Well, what now? But the devil was gone, and Max was alone. Forever. Thank you for listening to You're Going to Get It Wrong, an original short story by first-time guest author Claire Parker. Claire Parker is a recent transplant to New England from the great state of Texas, where people know how to make actual tacos. She likes fairy tales, Shakespeare, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, though none of those are as cool as her dog, Pocket. If she could be as cool as her brother one day, she'd be a happy woman. All sounds you hear come from freesound.org and freemusicarchive.org and are being used under CC 0.1.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. Additionally, the opening sounds are from our guest author Jack Lee, an original composition of him playing From Far, Far Away. That does it this week for Prose. Moving forward, keep your eyes peeled for a St. Patrick's Day treat. I hope that you'll remember to love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life, as it is always stranger than fiction. Thank you to our guest author Claire Parker. We'll see you next time, everyone.